Okay, cool. So hopefully you can see my the slideshow, kind of the same design as the slideshow I did 2.5 years ago when we were just starting Loanable Technology. So Loanable Tech started back in August, sorry, and 2021, right? So yeah, about 2.5 years maybe. Started off largely with headphones and things that were related to a lot of students wanting to do Zoom or needing to do Zoom, because at that point we were just coming out of COVID. But then, there were a lot of models around the country and so on that, that say just how important it is to have students get access to loanable technology of all kinds. And there's a sort of policy and philosophical arguments about that, which I'm really not going to get into. This is more of a nuts and bolts about our particular collection. But there are things like, it's like questions of equity, for instance, and how if you make technology available to every student, then that evens the playing field a bit. It also encourages experimentation, so that there's a lot of technology that people may never use, except that they can take it out for free because they might use it once or twice and then realize it's not for them, or realize that it is for them and they'll go and buy one. So it's almost like a testing ground for a lot of the equipment or a lot of the technology that we offer, right? So let me just go through some of the basics first. And again, this will be somewhat similar, though updated from what I had done 2.5 years ago. So we started in the summer and fall. The initial work, a lot of it was creating a website and supporting databases, which I'll discuss a bit in a minute. And then also the procedures. And I just want to give a shout out to Access Services, who were crucial to just making the day-to-day logistics of the operation possible. And just there's a lot of work that goes into that. And when you start doing equipment, you realize that equipment is different in various ways from books or print material and so on. And we're still having those conversations as well, as we realize some of the limitations of the policies and so on. We started with headphones and microphones. We also added GoPro cameras, which is one of the ones I was quite surprised at. There were two surprises. One was how popular the GoPros were, because we only bought, I think, 3 initially, and we have like 12 or 15 now. But also how many accessories there are with GoPros. I had no idea. This is not my field. So yeah, but all of the ways of connecting it to your body or to your boat or your car or whatever. So there's a lot of that goes into just expanding the collection. And then what we did was in 2022, there were 3 really big things strategically that we did with the collection. One of them is I started adding various specialized equipment. We have a couple digital turntables, we have 2 slide scanners, we have Oculus headsets and so on. And these are things, again, that are kind of, you only really need once or twice, but they're very useful when you need them. We also added SLR cameras. A lot of that was because we were in communication with the communication department or the College of Information and Communication. I forget what it's called now. And they needed SLR cameras. They actually had some, and they had money to buy more. And these are used by the journalism students and so on. And the idea there is that the faculty wanted the students to actually learn how to use a camera rather than an iPhone, because so much of the iPhone is automatic. It doesn't give you control over what you're taking and so on. And so they wanted cameras. But again, it's not like every student can be expected to buy their own SLR camera. So that's why we stepped in. Then the third thing we bought was anatomical models. And part of that is I'm the College of Education liaison, the kinesiology department had talked about it. Also, we have a bunch of allied health and even the medical school could use these sorts of things. And so, and then in 2023, more items. I'm not going to describe a lot of them. Excuse me. Just because a lot of them are sort of filling out the collection. Couple big things though. One is that we added a lot of adapters, because there's a lot of different adapters that need to be around, and also just a lot more wires and things like that. So that's the sort of general timeline. And here are some statistics. These are roughed out, rounded up or down, but this is as of yesterday. So we have about 260 different item types. and about 1,300 individual items. So notice again, just logistically, how that must be difficult for the access services to just deal with all of that. A lot of them are quite small, like the various wires and so on, but some of them are quite big. We have hand trucks now, for instance, which I think is probably the biggest thing we've got. Maybe not, it's close to that anyway. So about 950 items have been checked out at least once, which means, of course, that there are 350 items that have not been checked out. And so, that's one of the things when you start experimenting in terms of what to add, some things just don't go, right? And one of them I think that stands out for me is the tool chests. We bought a bunch of tool chests of one kind or another, partly for people to carry the loanable technology that they were taking out, because we were hoping to protect it. But yeah, that just hasn't had much traction. And there are some others that I think I expected to be more popular but weren't. And so yeah, there are hits and misses. And again, just keeping track of that is useful. The item that we have the most of, first one is electric tuners. And these are, well, we use them for the ukulele, but it's any stringed instrument pretty much. And the reason we had those was I bought some thinking that we needed them. And then when we bought the ukuleles, they all came with electric tuners as well. So we somehow, we had way more than we needed. So again, that's sort of a failure. The other is that we have a lot of charging blocks, in particular for the USB-As. And that's because one of the biggest things that we circulate are wires for people to recharge their smartphones. The least expensive item is free. We had a bunch of those. The other is, the $5 cables and stuff. The most expensive items are the SLR cameras. They're about $600. And that raises concerns for us. Just in the sense that if a student loses one of them, then they're on the hook for $600, and that can have fairly negative implications for their entire time at the university. So I mean, they're still on the hook. We're not going to let them off, but it is something that we worry about, and that's come up a bit in a way because the journalism department has asked us, or has offered to buy us some high-end lenses, and high-end means apparently like a $1,000 lens, which I think would be great, but it raises the same sort of issue. And I've made it clear to the journalism department that this is an issue for us. So okay, total circulations about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, we reached the 10,000 thresholds. We're about at 10,300 now. We get about 150 to 200 items checked out at any given time. One of the things that has been interesting when we've looked at the data the last year or so is that often they'll be checked out for the full week, which is how long students are allowed to check it out. But there are a lot of them, and in particular, the charging cables, where students just come into the library, they check it out, they recharge their phone, and then they put it back into our collection. So they return it after a couple hours. And that's very, very important, because one of the conversations we had was, should we have some of the charging cables for library use only, for instance? And I think we should in a way, but we don't really need to at a policy level, because that seems to be self-policing at this point. Not really sure. I mean, well, that's again an ongoing thing to concern ourselves with. So most circulated item, the Lightning to USB-A cable. We have 29 of them now. We started off with 10, and then as people keep complaining that they're already available, you add more to the collection. And they represent about 10% of our circulation, which is amazing. I mean, it's great, but it also means the more expensive stuff isn't circulating as much. So anyway, and then total lost items, a lot of them are cables and charging blocks. There are a few GoPros. There are a few that have been lost in the oceans of Hawaii. Yeah, so that's unfortunate. Again, those are about $300. But I think we've lost 4 of those at this point. But that's sort of just a general idea of the statistics connected to the technology collection. Quickly focusing on policies. So the items can be requested via the library catalog or the circulation desk. If you selected at the library catalog or requested there, you get put in a queue, and so it'll be ready for you at the circulation desk, and you sort of get in front of other people who are at the circulation desk requesting. And so there's a pecking order there. You can take it out for a week, and the ability to renew it if it's not been requested by someone else. And one of the things, just to step back for a second, one of the things that we've really tried to do is get these to be consistent, get the policies to be consistent. So there aren't some items that are a day and some items that are a week and so on. I know a lot of loanable tech organizations have that. And I think at some point we might want to differentiate, but at least at this point, we're really trying to be consistent about how we present these things. The other thing that we did, and I think this was quite important and hopefully relevant to the long-term use of the collection, is that the items can be borrowed by anyone in the UH system. Anyone, at any of the colleges and so on, partly because we just wanted to increase access and so on. But the other is this recognition that if there's a student on Maui who is actually living on Oahu, they can't access any loanable tech that Maui might have. And so accessing it through us would be a useful solution. The big thing though is that the item must be borrowed from and returned to Hamilton Library. So we don't do any interlibrary loaning. And part of that is because it's just not cost effective for a lot of the material. Like if someone wanted a cable, why would we mail it to another island and have it mailed back and so on? And the other is the time limitation that, the interlibrary loan takes, days going forward and back and so on. And they just seem to raise sort of too many logistical issues. And so the ideal, hopefully, and I hope the system moves in this direction, is that other libraries can have similar collections and sort of share the collections with the students on their islands and so on. But certainly for us, anybody who's part of the UH system who can access the library 2 times in a week would be able to borrow something. Fines are $1 a day. I made a note here, this has come up in the last few weeks, that we likely need to change this for some of the more expensive items. And the reason is that we figured out, or we at least hypothetically, that it's possible for a student, like say they wanted an SLR camera for a year, they could just borrow it. And then given the way that the fines work, which are really more book related fines, they end up having to pay like $40 or something maximum. And so they could keep the camera for like a full year, return the camera, and then they're out $40. So we need to work through that, but that's a conversation that's going to be happening. Then the last thing is, as I've mentioned, the patron is responsible for lost and damaged items. That's a bit of a concern for the higher priced items. It's also difficult sometimes to figure out who's responsible, because often we will get the counterclaim from the student or the patron saying, "Oh, I didn't get that piece. I checked out the SLR camera, but it didn't have the lens or didn't have whatever." So there's sort of that back and forth there. So those are the basic policies. One of the crucial things we did was we created the website. I actually did an article on this, just the design variations of loanable tech websites. Some of them are great, some of them aren't so great. One of the things that isn't great is trying to use the library catalog to find items. It doesn't work well with loanable tech because it's not clear what the what the keywords are, and you don't get the structure and so on. And so what the website offers, and I can go through this if there's time at the end, but it offers a complete list of items. And then it also offers sub lists based on type. So I think there are now about 12 or 14 different categories. So, lighting and tripods and adapters and things like that. And then you go to a detailed page, which is the example here. And that includes various types of information. It includes an external link to the library catalog, any external links as well to product information and so on. And then descriptions and a picture. And the pictures, I take those, and I then edit them with Photoshop and bring them down to a 400 by 400 image. And then they show up in various places on the website. And one of the reasons why I take them is that I'd like the standardization of size, and also just the ability to make sure that all of the pieces are viewable and countable. Because when things are being checked in and checked out and so on, it's important to have an image of what you're doing. The other thing that this website is used for, and I have a link here, hopefully this works, is we use this to create information sheets. And by that, I mean that these are like quarter page sheets that are essentially screenshots of this particular page, but they're designed for attaching to the items. So let me take you to that. There we go. So it's the same basic URL. I don't know if you can, yeah, you can see the URL up here. And I'll get into the data structure in a few minutes, but it's essentially, you know, devices slash and then the slug, which I'll talk about. And then if there's a parameter that says question mark barcode and then the number, then instead of giving you a link to the permalink, you know, to the library catalog, what it gives you is the barcode. And so we can print this out. And then the students at Access Services will laminate it and then attach it however they need to the item. And depending on the item, some of the boxes are quite small, some of them are larger. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that in terms of just creatively attaching this to the webs or to the items. The great thing about this though is that it gives you a barcode. And so if we need to print out a new one, it'll still have the old barcode and so on. And so, yeah, that was a great, I think a great addition to the process that Daniel come up with, because yeah, it just allows us to print the barcodes. Okay, but that's one of the uses of this item information page. So the website. Okay, processes for adding a new item. This varies a lot depending on the item, but basically we identify what to order, we order it and receive it, which is done through fiscal. Then it gets processed. And a lot of that is preparing information in a Google Doc. There's a spreadsheet that I can show you if we have time. Then it goes to cataloging. I take the picture. Then we also sometimes will create a second picture with numbered parts. This is in particular with like SLR cameras and stuff. I use some Photoshop for this. So I just use the existing parts image and then just put numbers on it. Okay. And then adding the item to the information or to the website database, and then create the information sheets that get sent to Access Services, and then the item gets processed. And this, again, there's a lot of work that goes into this. That's packaging, adding the information sheets, figure out where to store it, and so on and so forth. So that's essentially the process, at least the addition process. Okay, so I don't know if this will be useful. Like I put this together last night, but this is the data structure that we use for the whole process. There are really three databases. Two of them are spreadsheets, but it's the same basic idea. The resources sheet has essentially what's useful for the cataloger. So it's got the name, it's got the slug name, the URL for the product information, which is where she gets the information to put in the catalog, and then the permalink, which she puts in, and then the unit cost, and that becomes important for replacements and so on. And then the next one is the barcode sheet. This is, and I can show you this, I can show you all of them if you want, but sorry, this is the barcode sheet. Essentially, it's a barcode, it's the name, which isn't that relevant. It's got the slug. Now the slug becomes useful for all sorts of different levels of organizing the information because it becomes the file names for the images. It also becomes the URL for the item. So that if I wanted to find the Logitech H390 headset USB, I could just go to, I could go to Manoa.hawaii.edu/library/devices/Logitech H390 headset USB, and it would give me the page, right? So the page names are tied into the slug names. And then there's a URL to the barcode, and then this is the name that I put on the information sheet. So that's that one. Oops, sorry. And then the third data set is the LoanTech database. This is the online one that becomes the public-facing database. It has the name as it appears on the site. It's got the URL, which has the slug in it, and then descriptions of various kinds, and then the permalink, which is how people go to renew it or to request an item, and then the featured image and so on. Right. So I won't go into this so much, but yeah, just to give you a note or a sense of this is the barcode sheet. So this sends you to that barcode page that I had shown you earlier. This would just send, the second one would just send you to the information sheet as the patron would see it. And then this is the file name on my computer for that particular image, right? So again, the slug and the barcode all come together. Okay. So the website structure, just to point out, this is what the patron sees. So you can see that the URL is up in the slug there. The breadcrumbs here are based on the category that I give that particular item. So in this case, it's a charger. So it's in the charger devices, and people can back out of that as needed. The description, the button links, this links to the permanent bibliographic record in Primo. And then there's details, including the replacement fee and so on. And then if there's any additional information, I'll put that in. Some of them don't have it, but some of them do. And then the additional information might be something like, here's a related piece of equipment, or here's a book that will help you use the item, so on and so forth. And then the other thing that we have here is on the right side, there's a QR code. And this is a QR code to this particular page. So that if someone has a smartphone, they can use the QR code and they would be sent to this page, which then gets them into the general loanable tech structure. I don't know if anyone uses that. At some point, I thought that was a clever idea, and sometimes clever ideas are useful, and sometimes they're not. So yeah. Okay. So one of the things that we've tried to do, and it is still, I mean, there's so much to do in terms of outreach efforts. I mean, weekly, I'll tell someone about the loanable tech program, and they'll say, "Oh, I didn't know you had a loanable tech program." And it's because it's not new anymore. It's hard to say that that's the case, but it's not something that people necessarily associate with the library, and so we end up. We end up promoting it in all sorts of different ways. One is that we've done displays as part of the larger library outreach efforts. I haven't done one lately, but yeah, they show up. The library website now has a link in the main page to the loanable tech program, which I think has really helped. We've put stories in UH News, sometimes with new items. One thing we did last year, which I'm planning on doing again, is I think it was in March or April, we put a news, like an announcement out, basically saying that if anyone needed loanable tech over the summer, that they could request extended use. Now, they can always ask for extended use, so we weren't changing any policies here. What we were doing though was again promoting the collection by telling people that they could request items over the summer. And generally, I mean, we had, I think, 5 or 6 responses, which wasn't bad. I mean, I had no expectations about that. And it was largely graduate students doing field research, which is one of the things that we're trying to support. Then we also mention it in all of our library orientation presentations. We do probably 200-300 a year. I've done presentations for the Center for Teaching Excellence. Attendance has been spotty with that. And then just also direct communication with faculty, encouraging them to use it in one kind or another. So there's a lot of outreach efforts. I'm not the only one doing it. I know Jean has done a lot at the circulation desk, and when she's been talking to faculty and so on. And then some of my other colleagues will mention it in their presentations and so on. So yeah, there's a lot of outreach, but again, it's not something that people automatically think is a library thing. And so it's like, oh, you've got stuff, and we don't get. All right. So some of the day-to-day issues, one of them is just the amount of work. Most of it's done by Access Services, though I feel like I do a lot of work, but I know I don't. But a lot of it is the back and forth of how cables are missing or micro SD cards are missing, little bits and stuff. There's damage of one kind or another. Honestly, salt water is the most common source of problems, I think, and that's a lot of it with the GoPros. And then there's technical issues. There's also requests to keep an item for an extended period. Now, we have a Google Form system. And so if someone wants to request additional time, they can do that. And it's basically, who are you? What is the item? Why do you need it? And so on. It's not clear to me what counts as a legitimate request. I've generally accepted all of them. I think there are a few where they gave no reason for it, and especially if it's a high demand item, I've said no, but generally it's I've done that or accepted it. The other one, and this is harder, and generally I think I've said no with this, is that faculty wanting equipment reserved only for their students, which we just can't do. Now we can do it for a particular day, and we've done that certainly where people, or like there was a faculty member who did it was like the great race kind of game down in Chinatown, and she wanted all of the teams to have a GoPro. And so, she signed out 6 GoPros for about 4 or 5 days. And it was great, and so they all were recording each other and themselves, and then they reflected on it and so on. And that we can do. It's more people think, oh, I want this on reserve for my students only for this semester. And that's not what a lending library does. So yeah, so that's an issue. And that's more of a political issue, I think. All right. Let me talk about evaluating. So we can do various kinds of evaluation. One of them is, how often is an item checked out? And we can run reports now in Primo that will tell me how many items have been checked out, how often they've been checked out, and so on. One thing it does is it makes your failures quite clear, like the tool chests are just not going out, like twice maybe. And then the other is you can, this helps you add new items of an existing type. So I can look at the average circulation based on, average circulation based on total circulation of item type, and then divide that by the number of items. And so, the extreme example is the Lightning to USB cables, which has 1,000 circulations. We now have 29 of them. So it's about 30 circulations per unit. And that's all right, right? Because the biggest issue is you don't want people to show up wanting something and you not having it. But us having 29 of them is probably enough, right? But there have been times like the Wacom, whatever tablets, the pressured tablets. We only had 3 of them, and their average was about 20 or 30 per unit. And that just seemed too high. And so we've added more of those, or I think we're in the process of adding more of those. The other way of evaluating in terms of what to add is feedback from the circulation and the reference desks. And so we get people come in and ask, oh, do you have any X-Acto knives? And it's like, no, we don't have any X-Acto knives. There's someone a couple of weeks ago as a math major asked if we had any chalkboards. And it's like, no, we don't have any chalkboards. So we get the chalkboards. And the simple calculators was, I had gone into, or we had purchased the TI 89 calculator, the scientific ones. And those have been quite popular. But the problem was the students were coming in saying, oh, I'm not allowed to use that. I need a simple calculator. And so we bought some simple calculators. And those have been fairly popular as well. So that's one way to evaluate. It's just the quantitative and in some ways somewhat anecdotal feedback. The other is the qualitative, and this is harder for various reasons, but it's, because you're really questioning what is the impact, right? And so some of it is quite clear, the sort of saving the day kind of circulation where someone comes in, they didn't bring their charger, their computer is dying and they can't do anything unless they can charge their computer. We have a charger, so everything's good. But the other ones, like things like empowering research or improving learning and so on, those are way harder to judge. Especially, and another would be changing curriculum. And this is one thing we've been encouraging faculty to do is really change their curriculum to include loanable tech. And a lot of the sources of evidence, really, there are 2. One of them is just anecdotal. I mean, people, we talk to people and they say, thank you for having this, that, or the other thing. And then the other is, as I mentioned earlier, if people request for extensions, then they have to give a reason. And when they give a reason, we get a sense of how they're using it. And that gives us some sort of qualitative feedback. So that's, one evaluation. Okay, so the other is, the data sources, anecdotal, as I said. Classroom responses, again, is qualitative and probably not that structural, but when we give classroom presentations and we say, hey, there's loanable tech and people get excited, that's an indication that there's at least potential demand. Circulation data, as I mentioned, and then the email request. The other that we did once is we did an email link to Google Forms, and we sent an email survey to users, to people who had checked out loanable tech. One big problem with that, though, which is not solvable, well, who knows if it's solvable, but Primo quite rightly only keeps track of the last person who took out an item. And this is because we're really using a book system, and for various reasons of privacy and academic integrity and so on, we don't want to keep track of who's taking out what over a longer period of time. And so the problem is then that there are a lot of the items that circulate multiple times. We only get the last person who checked it out, and so it's a little weird that way in terms of how we're getting access to our emails. And one of the things I'm gonna talk to our systems people to see if there's a way of collecting the emails over time. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, it would be useful. I don't know if it's crucial though, and so if it's a hassle, we probably wouldn't do it. Now, one of the things that Clemson University does, they've published some articles on their evaluations and so on. What they do is apparently there's some trigger when someone checks something out that they get sent an email that has a link to a survey. And so there's a constant collection of survey data from them, which is useful. I mean, it's a potential, it's potentially a good thing, right? But I don't know if it's, again, what does it cost to create data and are you going to use it effectively? But that's something for us to consider. Clemson seems to have a really good system. Okay, so what to add? This is always a question. Now, at this point, we're really taking stuff out of the collection. It's only 2.5 years old, but there is this sort of, you know, at some point we'll be asking that too. But at this point, it's really more of an expansion narrative. So we need more calculators. We need more Mac chargers. We need more of the Wacom tablets. We need more SLR cameras, which are really expensive. And so I don't know if we're going to do that. But that's kind of, you know, those are items we currently have that are in high demand. And so those are candidates. The other is replacing lost and damaged items. They get worn out, they get water damage, and so on and so forth. Now, one of the questions that we'll have here is, if an item gets damaged, do we replace it with an existing, the same item, or do we change to a more updated one? So for instance, with the GoPros, all of our GoPros are Hero 8. And the reason I did that partly was because then I knew all the accessories would work for all the GoPros. And now I think it's up to Hero 12 or 13 or something like that. And so the question is, you know, do we sort of transition out of Hero 8s and go to a new one? And if so, which one? Because they're going to be more expensive. Missing parts. There are some weird ones here. Like the calibrating rulers, we have a USB microscope that has a tiny little plastic ruler that you need to use to calibrate the microscope. And they get lost, right? But they're also really expensive because they're made by that particular company, and they're not in the business of replacing missing parts. I don't think they're being malicious. That's just not their business model. So anyway, so we bought some, but that's something to consider. And then new items, as I said earlier, the computers, iPads. Well, we're also hopefully going to add some extra games and so on. We have chess at this point, and we also have ukuleles, but there are others that we can add in that direction. So that's some of the stuff that we're considering adding, but it depends on the budget, right? I mean, obviously everything is budget driven in this case, and so we'll see how that goes. So the future, just very quickly, one of them is to expand our outreach efforts, always going into the curriculum. Any of you who are connected to the University of Hawaii system might know that the learning management system is going to change next year. So that we're no longer going to have La Lima. We're going to have something else, and I don't know what it is. I mean, Canvas or something like that. And that's an opportunity, but it also means that people, you know, faculty everywhere are going to have to retool their courses. Another, and I mentioned it earlier, it's just integrating with other libraries. Like I know that other libraries have some loanable tech, and I haven't really gone into researching what they've got and so on and so forth. I just keep in my mind, think it might be good to have sort of a broader sense of what's going on. Maybe not though. You know, again, because of the issues of interlibrary loaning this kind of technology, it's probably, you know, maybe it's worth it, maybe it's not. Just a couple more quick things. One is that on our website, the interface is becoming a little clunky. Let me show you quickly here. Here, so this is the main site. You can see here how there are all of these categories and so on. And there were two triggers I thought that would happen, or if they happened, we would have to redo the website. One of them is that the categories extended over one line. Clearly they are well over one line at this point. The other is if the other category was too extensive, because then it's just kind of a catch-all whatever, and you should really rethink your categories. And so that also is the case. If you click on other here, there's an awful lot of stuff. And so it's not really a very helpful, not really very helpful interface. And so I think at some point we might have to redo the webpage. And the other is just there's a lot of internal stuff that needs to go on in terms of content on the web pages, linking one item to another, and so on. And then the policy changes I'd already kind of mentioned, the idea of increasing fines for more expensive items, and then the question of what to accept if something is lost and someone brings in an old piece of equipment that they've kept for a year or two. Again, not like a book. Where that's okay, probably, because with equipment, things get outdated very quickly sometimes, and they may just be giving you something that's really not that useful and that they've used for 2 years, right? So those are some of the policy conversations that will probably have to happen. And with that, I'm done. Now I do have windows open and stuff, so I'm happy to show you the interfaces and the background stuff and so on. And if not, I mean, I entertain your questions.